Think about how you feel when you walk into your home. Not the home you want, not the home you are planning to eventually create when you have more time, money, or energy. The home you walk into right now, today, after a long day. Does it feel like exhaling, or does it feel like adding something else to carry? Is it cluttered? Does it bring you peace or anxiety? Modern science has confirmed something that our ancestors understood deeply, and that most of us in the modern world have completely forgotten. The space you inhabit shapes you, not metaphorically, but physiologically. The light in your rooms is changing your hormone levels right now. The clutter on your counter is elevating your cortisol. The color of your walls is affecting your nervous system. The arrangement of your furniture is influencing how energy, both electromagnetic and psychological, moves through your daily life. For thousands of years, human beings have understood this so well that they built entire sciences around it. Feng Shui, Vastu Shastra, the Navajo Hogan, the Japanese tea room, the Roman lyrium. Every culture that has ever built a home has also had wisdom about how to make that home sacred. Somewhere in the last few centuries, in the rush toward rationalism and the stripping of anything mystical from ordinary life, we forgot that the home is not just a structure. It is a vessel, and the quality of what it holds is something you have more control over than you have ever been told. Today, we are going to take the control back.
We're going beyond horizons, where the mind and spirit meet, where the body finds its balance and the soul feels complete. Every story, every journey, every healing step we take, we're living life with purpose, with every breath we make. Beyond horizons, we rise.
Welcome to Beyond Horizons. I am CJ Sugita-Jackson, and this is the show where ancient wisdom and modern science stop competing and start confirming each other in ways that actually change how you live. Every week, we take a topic that lives at the intersection of metaphysical and the measurable, and we give it the full depth it deserves. Today's topic is one that is both deeply personal and profoundly universal, because every single person listening to this lives somewhere. And the somewhere you live is affecting you in ways that most people never examine. We are talking about sacred space today, about the ancient sciences of Feng Shui and Vastu Shastra and the spatial philosophies of cultures around the world, about what the neuroscience of environmental psychology has discovered about how your home shapes your brain, your hormones, your mood, and your capacity for the kind of presence that makes genuine life possible, and about what you can do with this information that doesn't require a renovation, a significant budget, or anyone's permission. Because sacred space is not a luxury. It is a fundamental human need, and it has always been available to everyone. So, let's build something beautiful. Quick note before we dive in. Horizyns is a holistic wellness marketplace and community platform launching in 2026. If you are a seeker, a creator, or a practitioner in this space, this is being built just for you. Learn more or schedule a demo at www.horizynsinc.com. That's HORIZYNSINC.com. Link is in the show notes. The separation of sacred and domestic space is not ancient. It is not natural. It is not the default human condition. It is a relatively recent and specifically Western phenomenon with identifiable historical roots. For the vast majority of human history, across virtually every culture on Earth, the home was understood as a sacred space, not a separate category from the temple or the shrine, not a lesser category, a genuinely sacred space in its own right, tended with ritual care, inhabited with spiritual intention, and understood as the place where the cosmic and the domestic met most intimately. The shift began with the Protestant Reformation of the 16th century. which specifically identified household shrines, domestic altars, and the ritualization of everyday objects as idolatry. Protestant theology deliberately stripped sacred imagery and practice from the domestic environment and relocated all legitimate spiritual activity to the institutional church. The Enlightenment of the 17th and 18th centuries then completed the process by reclassifying the home as a purely functional and secular space governed by reason and utility rather than meaning and mystery. The result is the modern home, efficient, functional, often beautiful, and for many people, spiritually hollow in a way they feel but have never had language for. What we are doing today is not importing something exotic. We are recovering something that was always ours. Feng Shui, the living science of energy and space. Feng Shui is one of the oldest and most sophisticated spatial sciences in human history, developed within the framework of Taoist philosophy in ancient China and refined over more than 3,000 years of practice and observation. Feng Shui, which translate literally as wind and water, is a system for understanding how the flow of qi, the vital life force energy, through a built environment affects the health, well-being, prosperity, relationships, and spiritual life of the people who inhabit it. Let me be clear about what Feng Shui actually is, because it is widely misunderstood in Western contexts. It is not primarily about decorating with lucky objects or placing a specific plant in the wealth corner of your living room and waiting for money to arrive. That is the trivialized commercial version. The genuine tradition is a sophisticated observational science that spent millennia cataloging the relationship between spatial arrangement, energy flow, natural forces, and human experience. And it arrived at conclusions that modern environmental psychology is now independently verifying through controlled research. The two primary classical schools of Feng Shui are the Form School and the Compass School. The Form School, the oldest branch, focuses on the shapes and contours of natural landscapes surrounding a building. The ideal Feng Shui site is protected at the back by a mountain or elevated terrain, open at the front to a view that allows qi to gather and embraced on the sides by gentle curves of land. This describes exactly the environmental configuration that evolutionary psychologists have documented as the universally preferred human landscape preference, a sheltered position with a commanding view that allows you to see what is approaching from a position of safety. The Compass School incorporates directional orientation, the Bagua map, which divides any space into 8 areas corresponding specific life domains, and the complex system of the 5 elements: wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. Each element corresponds to specific colors, shapes, materials, seasons, and qualities of energy. A home or room that has a harmonious balance of all 5 elements is understood to support the full spectrum of human flourishing. The Bagua, mapping your space for intentional living. The Bagua is the practical heart of Feng Shui application, and it is worth spending time here because it gives listeners something genuinely actionable to take home from this episode. The Bagua is an octagonal map that can be overlaid on any space, whether an entire home or a single room, using the front entrance as the starting point. The 8 sections of the Bagua correspond to 8 life areas: career and life, knowledge and self-cultivation, family and foundation, abundance and prosperity, reputation and fame, love and relationships, creativity and children, helpful people and travel, the Tai Chi or center. The practical application is this. You overlay the Bagua on your floor plan with the entrance wall at the bottom. You identify which area of your home or room corresponds to the life domain you most want to support, and you tend that area with intention, keeping it clear, activating it with corresponding elements, colors, shapes, and materials, and placing meaningful objects there that reinforce your intention. This is not superstition. It is directed attention applied to physical space, and the research on symbolic self-completion, which we will discuss in Part 2, explains exactly why this works. 5 elements in your home. The 5-element system in Feng Shui is one of the most sophisticated frameworks for understanding the energetic quality of a space. Each element has specific physical correspondence that translate directly into design choices. Wood energy is associated with growth, vitality, upward movement, and new beginnings. It is activated by the colors green and teal, by tall vertical shapes, by living plants, by wooden furniture and natural wood textures, and by images of forests, trees, and upward growth. A home deficient in wood energy may feel stagnant, lacking in forward momentum, or creatively blocked. Fire energy is associated with passion, recognition, warmth, and transformation. It is activated by the colors red, orange, and vibrant pink, by triangular and pointed shapes, by candles and actual fire, by lighting of all kinds, and by images of the sun and animals. A home deficient in fire energy may feel cold, socially withdrawn, or lacking in motivation and enthusiasm. Earth energy is associated with stability, nourishment, self-care, and grounding. It is activated by the colors yellow, terracotta, and earthy brown, by square and low horizontal shapes, by ceramics and clay objects, by natural crystals and stones, and by images of landscape and mountains. A home deficient in earth energy may feel unstable, anxious, or lacking in the sense of being genuinely held and supported. Metal energy is associated with clarity, precision, efficiency, and completion. It is activated by the colors white, gray, and metallic tones, by circular and arched shapes, by metal objects of all kinds, and by images of geometric precision and architectural clarity. A home deficient in metal energy may feel chaotic, unfocused, or emotionally cluttered. Water energy is associated with wisdom, flow, depth, and connection. It is activated by the colors black, deep blue, and deep purple, by flowing and asymmetrical shapes, by actual water features including fountains and aquariums, by glass and reflective surfaces, and by images of the ocean, rivers, and flowing landscapes. A home deficient in water energy may feel rigid, overly structured, or emotionally dry. A skillfully designed home will have all 5 elements present in harmonious proportion. No single element dominates to the point of suppressing the others. The balance is dynamic, not static, and it can be adjusted seasonally, intentionally, and in response to what is most needed in your life at any given time. Vastu Shastra, the ancient Indian science of sacred architecture. Vastu Shastra, the ancient Indian science of sacred architecture, predates Feng Shui in its documented written form, and represents one of the most comprehensive systems of spatial philosophy ever developed. The foundation texts of Vastu include the Manasara and the Mayamata, date to the first millennium CE, but encode principles that were in practical use for thousands of years before being committed to writing. Vastu understands every built structure as a living organism embedded in a larger cosmic order. The building is oriented in precise relationship to the cardinal directions and to the movement of the sun. The northeast corner is considered the most sacred area of any home. It's associated with light, knowledge, and spiritual energy, and should be kept clear and clean with no heavy objects. The southwest corner is considered the heaviest and most stable, associated with the earth element and the ancestors, and should be the anchor, the structure with solid, grounded weight. The central open space of the home, called the Brahmasthan, corresponds to the navel of the cosmic being and should be kept open and unobstructed to allow energy to circulate freely through the entire structure. Modern open-plan architecture arrived at through aesthetic and social evolution, independently recreated a principle that Vastu encoded thousands of years ago. Light and ventilation in Vastu are not merely practical concerns, they are sacred ones. The morning light entering from the east and northeast is understood as nourishing, health-promoting, and spiritually supportive. The heavy afternoon light from the west is understood as taxing and should be moderated through window placement and shading. Research on circadian rhythm and the specific effects of morning versus afternoon light exposure on cortisol and melatonin validates this ancient directional wisdom entirely. Other sacred home traditions worth knowing. The Navajo hogan is perhaps the most complete example of a dwelling designed as a conscious model of the cosmos. The traditional hogan faces east to receive the morning sun. Its circular form represents the wholeness of the cosmos. Its construction follows specific ceremonial protocols. The space inside corresponds to specific cosmological zones. Living in a hogan is understood as living inside a prayer. The Japanese tea room, which is one of my favorites, refined over centuries by masters including Sen no Rikyu in the 16th century, represents the most distilled and precise example of a space designed to facilitate a specific quality of inner experience. Every element of the tea room is chosen and arranged to promote equality, presence, simplicity, and the appreciation of impermanence. The entrance is deliberately small, requiring every person to bow, regardless of their social status. The materials are rough, natural, imperfect, embodying the philosophy of wabi-sabi, the beauty of imperfection and transience. The space is acoustically designed to support silence. It is a masterpiece of environmental psychology applied with spiritual intention. The Roman Larium was a household shrine maintained in virtually every home across the Roman Empire, placed typically in the kitchen or the atrium, dedicated to Lares and Penates, the protective spirits of the household. The daily ritual of tending the Larium, offering small amounts of food, wine, or incense, was understood as fundamental to the well-being of the entire family. The sacred was not separate from daily domestic life. It was woven into it in its most ordinary moments. Celtic and pagan traditions across Europe developed rich practices around the sanctification of thresholds, hearth fires, and garden spaces. The hearth was the spiritual and physical center of the Celtic home, the dwelling place of protective ancestors and spirits. Threshold rituals bless the boundary between inside and outside as a sacred crossing. These are not superstitions. They are psychologically sophisticated practices for creating a felt sense of protection, intentionality, and sacred boundary around the life of the household. Every civilization that has left us a record understood that the home is not merely a shelter. It is the first and most intimate temple every human being inhabits. Environmental psychology, the science of how space shapes us. Environmental psychology is a well-established field with decades of rigorous research documenting how physical space affects human cognition, emotion, creativity, stress response, and physiological health. And its findings consistently validate what the ancient spatial traditions understood intuitively. The foundational study in this field is Roger Ulrich's landmark 1984 paper published in Science, one of the most cited papers in environmental research history. Ulrich documented that hospital patients whose windows overlooked trees and natural vegetation recovered measurably faster from surgery, used significantly less pain medication, had better clinical outcomes, and were discharged from the hospital sooner than patients whose windows overlooked a brick wall. The only variable was the view. The space itself was producing measurable psychological and physiological change. Esther Sternberg at the National Institutes of Health, whose book Healing Spaces synthesizes decades of environmental research, documents how specific spatial elements include natural light exposure, ceiling height, acoustic properties, color, air quality, access to natural views, and spatial organization produce measurable effects on cortisol levels, immune function, cognitive performance, and emotional regulation. The spaces we inhabit are not neutral containers for our experience. They are active participants in it. The clutter and cortisol connection. Now, here is the finding that I want you to sit with, because this one is immediately actionable and consistently produces the strongest response of any piece of research in this episode. Research published in the journal Personality and Social Psychology Bulletin, conducted by environmental psychologist Darby Saxby and his colleagues, discovered that measured cortisol levels throughout the day in women who were asked to describe their homes. Women who described their homes as cluttered, unfinished, or in need of work showed elevated cortisol not just when they were in their homes, but throughout the entire day. The stress was not situational. It was chronic and pervasive. The disorder in their physical environment was producing a continuous, low-level, physiological stress response that followed them everywhere they went. Physical disorder is not just aesthetically unpleasant. Your nervous system reads visual chaos as an environmental threat. The ancient practitioners who insisted on cleared, clean, intentionally arranged spaces were not being aesthetically precarious. They were managing the physiological stress response of the people who lived there. This means that the most powerful and most immediate thing most people can do to create sacred space in their home costs absolutely nothing. It is simply removing what does not belong. The neuroscience of ceiling height and spatial proportion. Research published in the Journal of Consumer Research by psychologists Joan Myers-Levy and Rougeux documented that ceiling height affects the nature of cognitive processing in measurable ways. High ceilings consistently promote abstract, creative, expansive, and associative thinking. Low ceilings promote focused, detail-oriented, and concrete thinking. The ancient builders who constructed soaring cathedral ceilings specifically to induce awe, wonder, and connection to the transcendent, and the Japanese tea masters who built low, intimate tea rooms, specifically to encourage presence, equality, and focused attention, were both working with genuine neurological realities that cognitive science has since independently confirmed. The Feng Shui principle that qi flows most freely in spaces with good proportion and unobstructed movement has a neurological basis. Research on spatial fluency, the ease with which the eye and the attention can move through a space, shows that spaces with good flow produce lower cognitive load and lower stress response than spaces that are cramped, obstructed, or visually confusing. Color science, what your walls are doing to your nervous system. Color is not neutral. Every color in your environment is actively interacting with your nervous system. And the research on color psychology validates the color associations in both Feng Shui and Vastu Shastra with remarkable precision. Blue measurably lowers heart rate and blood pressure. Research published in Color Research and Application documents that environments with blue color schemes produce significant reductions in sympathetic nervous system activation compared to neutral or warm environments. The Feng Shui and Vastu associations of blue and deep teal with water energy, calm, depth, and introspection are physiologically accurate. Green measurably reduces sympathetic nervous system activation and promotes parasympathetic state, the color of natural vegetation which the human visual system evolved over millions of years to associate with safety, resource availability, and the absence of immediate threat, produces an immediate relaxation response. The consistent use of green in spaces designated for healing, rest, and restoration across virtually every ancient spatial tradition reflects this neurological reality. Red increases alertness, energy, and heart rate. In small doses and in appropriate contexts, this activating and motivating. In large doses or in spaces intended for rest and restoration, it is physiologically counterproductive. The Feng Shui fire element associated of red with passion, recognition, and transformation, combined with the recommendation to use it sparingly and intentionally, reflects a sophisticated understanding of its neurological effects. Yellow promotes serotonin production and is associated with intellectual stimulation and social warmth. However, research also shows that large doses of intense yellow increase anxiety and agitation in many people. The ancient recommendation to use warm yellow and gold tones in moderate doses as an accent rather than as a dominant color is neurologically well-founded. White and light neutrals reduce visual stimulation and cognitive load, but can produce coldness and emotional flatness when not balanced with warmth and texture. The Feng Shui metal element association of white with clarity, completion, and precision reflects its clean, simplifying effect on visual cognition. The lighting revolution, what your artificial light is doing to your hormones. Here is something that most people have never thought about and that will permanently change how you think about your home environment. The standard LED and fluorescent lighting used in the vast majority of modern homes emits what lighting researchers call blue spectrum light. Blue light wavelengths in the range of 460 to 480 nanometers directly suppresses melatonin production and maintains cortisol elevation. Your evening lighting is signaling to your nervous system and endocrine system that it is still midday. Research published in the Journal of Biological Rhythms and in the Chronobiology International has documented the significant disruption of circadian rhythm caused by blue spectrum artificial lighting in the evening hours. The consequences include difficulty falling asleep, reduced sleep quality, disrupted cortisol rhythm, compromised immune function, and increased risk for the chronic health conditions associated with long-term sleep disruption. The ancient practice of using candlelight and firelight in the home after dark was not merely practical. It was physiologically appropriate in a way that the modern lighting industry has comprehensively undone. Candlelight and warm spectrum firelight emit in the amber and red wavelengths that do not suppress melatonin and do not disrupt the body's preparation for sleep. The human nervous system evolved over hundreds of thousands of years in the presence of fire as the only artificial light source. That is what it expects, and when it receives it, it responds with the hormonal cascade that prepares the body for genuine rest. The practical implication is significant. Replacing blue spectrum LED bulbs in your bedroom and living areas with warm spectrum amber bulbs, or simply switching to candlelight for 1 to 2 hours before sleep, will produce measurable improvements in sleep quality and melatonin production within days. This is one of the most evidence-supported and least discussed interventions in the entire wellness space. The science of scent, direct access to the emotional brain. Every other sense passes through the thalamus, the brain's relay station, before reaching the cortex for conscious processing. Scent is the exception. The olfactory system has a direct neural pathway to the amygdala and the hippocampus, the emotional and memory centers of the brain, without thalamic relay. Scent reaches the emotional brain before the conscious mind even registers that a smell is present. This is why a specific scent can transport you back 20 years in an instant, and it is why the intentional use of scent in sacred space is not decorative. It is neurologically precise. Research published in the International Journal of Neuroscience documented that lavender significantly reduces anxiety, depression, and restlessness through documented analgesic effects on the central nervous system. Research in the journal Chemical Senses documented that rosemary aroma significantly improves speed and accuracy of mental computation and quality of memory. Research published in the journal FASEB documented that frankincense, specifically its active compound incensol acetate, activates TRPV3 ion channels in the brain, producing measurable feelings of warmth, openness, and emotional well-being that are distinct from the placebo response. Incensol acetate in frankincense, the specific resin that has been burned in sacred spaces across Egyptian temples, Christian churches, Buddhist monasteries, and countless other traditions for thousands of years. It activates a specific ion channel in the brain that produces feelings of genuine spiritual openness. That is not coincidence. That is ancient empiricism. Sound in the home, the acoustic environment as medicine. Building on what we explored in episode 11 on vibrational healing, the acoustic environment of your home is an active influence on your neurological state, and most people have never thought about it at all. Research published in the Journal of Consumer Research found that moderate ambient sound levels of approximately 70 decibels promote creative thinking more effectively than both silence and high noise levels. The urban hum of traffic, appliances, and background noise that characterizes most modern homes is frequently well above this level and in the frequency ranges most associated with cognitive disruption and elevated stress response. Research on nature sounds, specifically the sounds of flowing water, birdsong, and wind through trees, consistently shows measurable reduction in cortisol and activation of the parasympathetic nervous system. Small water features, high-quality nature sound recordings, and the deliberate placement of wind chimes that catch the breeze are not merely aesthetic choices, they are acoustic medicine. The Feng Shui recommendation to place water features in the north or east of a home to support career flow and new beginnings, when understood as a recommendation to create a specific acoustic environment in specific spatial locations, becomes something that both ancient tradition and modern acoustic research can simultaneously endorse. The altar as applied neuroscience. Psychologist Robert Wickland at the Free University of Berlin developed what he called symbolic self-completion theory, which proposes that human beings use objects and symbols in their environment to maintain and reinforce their senses of identity and their relationship to their goals and values. Research published in the Journal of Consumer Psychology confirmed that deliberate arrangement of meaningful objects in a space produces measurable effects on the self-concept clarity, goal motivation, and the likelihood of taking values-aligned action. An altar is not primitive magic. It is applied psychology. It is the deliberate arrangement of objects that carry meaning, that represent your values, your aspirations, your connections to what is sacred in a specific location that receives your attention regularly. Every time your attention rests on that arrangement, your neural association between those values and your sense of self is reinforced. The research on habit formation by behavioral scientist B.J. Fogg at Stanford confirms the related principle that environmental cues are the most powerful triggers for consistent behavior. Designing your environment to make your desired behaviors easier and your desired states more accessible is not spiritual thinking. It is the most evidence-based approach to behavioral change available. The ancient builders of sacred space were not decorating. They were engineering specific neurological and physiological states in people who inhabited those spaces. And modern science is now confirming, measure by measure, that they knew exactly what they were doing. Everything we have explored today becomes most valuable when it lands in your actual home, in your actual life, with whatever you actually have available to you right now. Sacred space is not a luxury. It does not require a beautiful home. It does not require a significant budget. It does not require permission from anyone or expertise in any tradition. It requires only your attention, your intention, and your willingness to treat the space you inhabit as worthy of care. Download our free Sacred Home Design Workbook at our blog at www.beyondhorizyns.com. That's www.beyondhorizyns.com. Okay, step 1. Clear before you create. This is where your sacred space practice begins, without exception. Across every tradition we discuss today, before you add anything, remove what does not serve. Feng Shui is unequivocal on this point. Clutter is stagnant qi. It is energy that has accumulated and stopped moving. It holds you energetically in the past because every object you have not consciously chosen to keep is an unconscious decision you have been avoiding making. And as the cortisol research confirmed, that avoidance has a physiological cost that follows you throughout your day. The decluttering protocol that most consistently produces results is simple. Touch every object in a space and ask 2 questions. Does this serve a genuine function in my current life? Does this carry meaning that I consciously choose to keep? If the answer both is no, the object is holding space that belongs to something else. You do not have to do this all at once. Start with one surface, one drawer, one corner. The principle that you are applying to the physical space begins to apply to the inner space simultaneously. That is not a metaphor. That is the document experience of virtually everyone who is engaged seriously with this practice. Step 2. Apply the Bagua with one intention. You do not need to become a Feng Shui practitioner or master to use the Bagua productively. Choose one life area that most needs your attention right now: relationships, career, health, creativity. Locate that area in your home using the Bagua map and give it your conscious attention. Clear it, clean it. Place something meaningful there that reflects your intention for that area of your life. Activate the corresponding element with its color, shape, or material. Intend it regularly. The practice is not about the objects. It is about the repeated, deliberate direction of your attention toward what matters most to you. Step 3. Address your lighting. This is the highest impact and most underutilized change available in most homes. Replace the bulbs in your bedroom and primary living areas with warm spectrum amber LEDs rated at 2700 Kelvin or lower. Order a set of beeswax or soy candles and commit to lighting them for at least 1 hour before sleep. Within 1 week of consistent warm spectrum evening lighting, most people report measurable improvements in sleep onset time, sleep quality, and morning energy levels. This single change may do more for your daily well-being than anything else in this episode, and it costs less than a single therapy session. Step 4. Create your altar. An altar does not have to look like anything in particular. It does not have to include specific objects that belong to a specific tradition. It has to be meaningful to you specifically. Choose a surface: a shelf, a corner of a dresser, a small table, a windowsill. Clear it completely. Then place on it only objects that carry genuine meaning: a photograph of someone you love, a stone from a place that matters to you, a candle in a color that feels right, a plant, a written intention, an image that represents what you are moving toward. Tend this space. Visit it with intention at least once daily. Light the candle. Sit with it for even 2 minutes. The neurological mechanism of symbolic self-completion means that this practice is actively reinforcing your identity, your values, and your connection to what is sacred in ways that accumulate across time. Step 5. Engage all 5 senses intentionally. The most complete sacred spaces engage the full sensory range. This is not about excess. It is about the research-confirmed principle that multisensory environments produce more integrated neurological responses than single-sense environments. Sight. Use the color psychology and lighting research. Introduce one element of each of the 5 feng shui elements somewhere in your primary living space. Bring in natural materials and living plants. Scent. Choose 1 or 2 intentional scents for your sacred space. Lavender for the bedroom to promote relaxation and sleep. Rosemary for a workspace or study to support mental clarity. Frankincense for meditation or prayer space to activate that documented sense of spiritual openness. Sound. Create a curated sonic environment, a small water feature for flow and ambient sound, a wind chime placed where it will catch movement, a specific playlist or sound healing recording designated for sacred space-time. Silence itself, deliberately chosen, is a sonic environment. Touch. Natural textures, smooth stones, soft fabrics, plants whose leaves you can touch. The tactile dimension of sacred space is frequently overlooked and powerfully effective. Bringing natural materials into the home, wood, stone, clay, cotton, silk, connects the body to the earth element in a way that synthetic materials cannot replicate. Taste. The ritual beverage as a sacred practice. We will return to this with tea for peace in a moment, but the conscious preparation and reception of a warm, intentional drink as part of your sacred space practice is one of the oldest and most complete ritual technologies available to any human being, regardless of tradition, budget, or living situation. Step 6. Create your tech-free zone. Research on the neurological effects of screen use before sleep conducted at Harvard Medical School and published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, documented that reading on a light-emitting device before bed suppresses melatonin by approximately 50%, delays the circadian clock by up to 1.5 hours, and reduces the amount of REM sleep the following night, even if total sleep time is the same. Your bedroom is your most important sacred space, and most people have filled it with devices that are physiologically incompatible with the rest, restoration, and genuine presence it is designed to support. Designate your bedroom or your primary sacred space as a no-screen zone. Remove the television. Charge your phone outside the room. Replace the habit of scrolling before sleep with the habit of candlelight and intentional quiet. The resistance to this change is real and understandable. The neurological benefit of doing it consistently is one of the most documented in the entire sleep and wellness research literature. Let's hold the full picture for a moment, because when you bring everything together, what emerges is something quite beautiful. 3,000 years of Feng Shui observation and practice, arriving at specific recommendations about energy flow, elemental balance, and spatial arrangement are now being confirmed by environmental psychologists, neuroscientists, color researchers, acoustic scientists, lighting researchers, and behavioral scientists who independently arrived at the same conclusions through completely different methodologies. The Baghua's guidance to keep the northeast clear and light corresponds to the circadian research on the physiological benefits of morning eastern light. The water element's placement near the entrance corresponds to the acoustic research on the cortisol-reducing effects of flowing water sounds. The fire element's association with candles and warm light in living and social areas corresponds exactly to the lighting research on warm spectrum light and its effects on melatonin and nervous system regulation. The recommendation to keep central spaces open corresponds to the spatial fluency research on cognitive load and stress. Vastuशास्त्रा's emphasis on the northeast as the sacred light-filled zone corresponds to the circadian biology of morning light. The Navajo Hogan's orientation to the east corresponds to the same research. The Japanese tea room's deliberate use of rough, natural materials, acoustic softness, and sensory restraint corresponds to the environmental psychology research on restorative environments. The traditions arrived first. The science arrived to confirm them. Your home is already affecting you. The question is only whether it is affecting you with intention or by default. Sacred space practice is simply the decision to be intentional, to treat the space you inhabit as worthy of the same care you would bring to your body, your relationships, and your inner life. And here is the most important thing I want you to take away from today. You do not have to do this all at once. You do not have to do it perfectly. You do not need anyone's permission or anyone's approval. You do not need a beautiful home or a significant budget or expertise in any ancient tradition. You need one clear surface, one candle, one meaningful object, one window you open in the morning to let the light in. That is enough to begin, and beginning is everything. The most sacred space you will ever inhabit is the one you tend with genuine attention and genuine love. It does not matter how small it is. It does not matter how humble it appears. What matters is the intention that lives inside it. This episode is brought to you by Tea for Peace Tranquility Lounge. Of all of the episodes in our catalog, this one pairs most naturally with what Tea for Peace is built on, because a dedicated tea space in your home is the most complete and most accessible form of sacred space creation available to anyone. Today's quick tip: designate one specific corner, one specific surface as your tea space. Keep it clear. Keep it intentional. Place only what belongs to the ritual there: a tray, your chosen teas, a small candle, perhaps one meaningful object. Research on environmental cues and habit formation confirms that associating a specific physical location with a specific quality of inner experience creates a neurological shortcut. Over time, simply sitting in your tea space will begin to trigger the calm, present, grounded state you cultivate there. The space itself becomes the medicine. Tea for Peace Tranquility Lounge is built around exactly this kind of intentional, ritual-centered, multisensory wellness. Find us through the link in the show notes and create your tea corner today. Today we trace the history of the sacred home from the ancient Egyptians and the Chinese Taoist masters of Feng Shui to the architects of Vastu Shastra, the builders of the Navajo Hogan, the Japanese tea masters, and the Celtic keepers of the hearth flame. We understood that the stripping of the sacred from the domestic space is not ancient or universal. It is a recent and specific cultural intervention with identifiable historical causes. And we understood that what so many people are feeling in their homes, that sense of something missing, is not a personal failure. It is a cultural wound with a cultural remedy. We explored the science, Roger Ulrich Hospital Window Study, the clutter and cortisol research, the ceiling height and cognitive processing findings, color psychology, the lighting revolution, and what blue spectrum evening light is doing to our hormones, the direct neural pathway of scent to the emotional brain, and what frankincense is specifically activating in the TRPV3 ion channels, the acoustic research on water sounds and ambient environments, and the altar as documented applied neuroscience. And we walked through the 6 practical steps that require nothing but your intention and your time. Clear before you create. Apply the Bagua with one intention. Address your lighting. Build your altar. Engage all 5 senses deliberately. And create your technology-free sacred zone. Your home already has the potential to be the most healing environment in your life. The question is only whether you are going to tend it with the intention it deserves. Start tonight. 1 candle, 1 clear surface, 1 window opened to the morning light tomorrow. And welcome home. If this episode gave you something to think about, please follow the Beyond Horizons podcast wherever you are listening so you never miss a future conversation. And come join our Horizyns community at www.horizyns.com. That's HORIZYNSINC.com, where you can meet like-minded individuals, find amazing products, and take workshops from our many curated vendors. Each week, we explore new ideas, traditions, and perspectives that help us live more balanced and meaningful lives. Thank you for being here. Thank you for doing the kind of work that takes courage. And until next time, keep exploring what lies beyond the horizon.
We're going beyond horizons, where the mind is